It's Reefer Madness, the podcast, with Trevor and Kirk.
Hey, this is Ethan Zohn, and you're listening to Reefer Madness.
Wonderful. Reefer Madness, the podcast. I'm Kirk Nyquist, I'm the nurse.
I'm Trevor Shufeld, I'm the pharmacist.
And we have just interviewed Ethan Zohn from Survivor.
So no apologies to Ethan. I think it was Renee who first sort of brought him to our attention, and I had no idea who he was. And he said, don't worry, he's a pretty guy who did Survivor. I said, yeah, sure, why not? But no, he was really, really interesting.
Actually, when I did my research on him, I recognize him. They invited themselves to our podcast.
Yeah, no, and well, we'll let him do his, but just real quick, way back in 2001, winner of Survivor Africa. Well, even before that, professional soccer player, played soccer in Africa, then was on and won like the second season of Survivor Africa, did a whole bunch of other interesting stuff in between, including getting cancer, which, interesting but despite all that, then sort of in the process of many other things, which you'll get into, discovered cannabis.
Yes, I found his story fascinating. This was your interview. As if we ever get this stuff on YouTube, the audience will notice that I wasn't saying much, but I loved his story. Living in New York City, being treated for cancer, having to go to the streets to get his cannabis.
He said, I am literally gloved and masked and no hair because I'm in cancer chemo treatment, going down to try and find a dealer.
Amazing, right? Amazing. So this man was, again, so gracious. We've interviewed a few celebrities in this podcast. Who would have thought, Trevor, that we'd get celebrities to interview, and big celebrities. I've been very focused, of course. We got COVID-19 happening. You're working exorbitant amount of hours. Renee's working hours. I've been on quarantine. I started doing my research. This is a phenomenal man. I apologize that I didn't know him.
Yeah, and we'll get but even his charitable work, like, it's a big part of what he does now. But when he was playing soccer in Africa, he saw what the AIDS crisis did to his literal teammates. Like the starting goalie from his team got HIV and got ostracized by the team, and he thought, I should do something about this, and eventually he did do something about it. So it's, what? How about we'll let Ethan tell about his story, and then we'll talk about him a little bit afterwards.
And yes, phenomenal story. Let's hear this man's story.
We're back with Reefer Madness on the line, and on Zoom we have Ethan Zohn, who one of my coworkers tells me right as we're taping this is on Exile Island on Survivor, but we see him in the flesh here. Ethan, nice for you to be on the podcast. Tell us a little bit about how you start being a keeper in professional soccer and where you went from there.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. It's great to be in touch with you guys and be on your podcast. So it's an honor. And my soccer career started early on in life. I had two older brothers, so I was the youngest of three, and they basically just put me in the backyard and just blasted shots at my face. So I quickly learned how to protect myself, so I didn't get injured, and that blossomed into a pretty fun and long career as a soccer goalkeeper. And I played in high school, I played in college, and then I continued to play after college for 6 years professionally.
And some of that professional soccer actually was in Zimbabwe. So is that how you ended up going from soccer goalie to one of the early survivors?
A little bit, I think. So before the television show Survivor, I was playing soccer in Zimbabwe, played in the Zimbabwe Premier League. And, as pharmacists and nurses, it was you would be interested to understand all the kind of interesting alternative therapies that were part of the process of playing for a team in Zimbabwe. And we had some pretty crazy traditional ceremonies like pre-game, post-game. So we can get into that another time. But yeah, while I was playing in Zimbabwe, I witnessed firsthand at that time what was happening with HIV and AIDS and how it was just destroying this community that I was now a part of. And one of my closest friends, a starting goalkeeper, actually, this guy named Amon ended up contracting HIV, ostracized from the team, and just ended living the rest of his life in a really lonely, horrible way. So at that time in my life, I was like, what can I do about this horrible, massive problem in all of Africa? So I didn't do anything, to tell you the truth. I said, it's not my problem. Someone else will deal with it. Let's just play soccer. Returned home to the United States. Soccer career went a fast spiral out of control, and I ended up having to change directions. And that's when I just, on a whim, sent in a tape to be on the show Survivor. And that was in around 2001.
Wow. So now for those who don't remember, you did eventually through many twists and turns, actually ended up winning Survivor Africa. And then I know you did many things after that, but one of the things you did with your winnings was start a charity.
Exactly. And, actually during my time in Survivor, we filmed our Survivor in Kenya. So I went back to Africa, not Zimbabwe, but this time to Kenya to play the game of Survivor. And actually, while I was playing the show, I had an opportunity where I won a reward challenge where I won these 2 goats, which I wasn't so happy about. But I got to take these goats to this little village of Wamba. And I was hanging out in the parking lot of Wamba Hospital, which was no bigger than like a small school building. And all these little Kenyan children came out, and we just started playing soccer together, and we were laughing and smiling and communicating and sharing this moment through a sport that we both love and a language we could both understand. And later I found out from one of the nurses there at this hospital that these were the kids that were HIV positive. And I was like, wow. Like, here we go. Here I am in the middle of this game, this cutthroat game of Survivor, and I had this real life experience. And it was at that moment I decided that something should be done. And luckily, I ended up winning. Like you said, you get $1 million when you win Survivor. So I used that money and met up with some of my soccer buddies, and we created this organization called Grassroots Soccer.
Wow. And that's still going on today, right?
Of course. Yeah. Grassroots Soccer. We're an adolescent health organization. We use soccer to teach kids on making healthier choices in life. And we're in 60 countries. We graduated 2.7 million kids from the program to date.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
All right. So after there's many things on your resume. And if we don't run out of time, I really want to ask you about Celebrity Apprentice and Donald Trump, but we'll leave that until we have time. A whole other podcast, but
what preempted my time on Celebrity Apprentice, and that was just a guest appearance, but I was actually a judge at the Miss Universe pageant in which Donald Trump was the owner of the pageant. So I met him there, and there's some pretty shady stuff that was going on in and around the pageant, which I can tell you offline as well.
So many other podcasts, but we're going to stick to the health and cannabis for the moment. You had, so after Survivor and you many other television appearances, and you were a sportscaster and you were a travelogue guy. Your health took a turn for the worse. What happened?
It did. I was 35 years old and kind of training for the New York City Marathon when I had some really itchy skin, like really horribly itchy skin, to the point where I couldn't even really wear clothes or take a shower. It was debilitating. And after trying every pill and cream and lotion, everything that doctors gave to me, nothing seemed to work. And then a swollen lymph node popped out of my neck, and they found a 6 centimeter by 12 centimeter mass in my chest. And I was diagnosed with a rare form of blood cancer called CD20 positive Hodgkin's lymphoma. You guys may have heard of it. I hadn't heard of it at the time.
No, honestly, I had to look it up too.
Yeah. And I went, I went through multiple rounds of chemotherapy, 22 blasts of radiation. I went through an autologous stem cell transplant, which worked for a short time. 20 months after my first transplant, I relapsed again. And I had to do it all over again, chemo, radiation. I went on an experimental new therapy, and that got my cancer into remission for the second time. And then I was able to go on to get my second stem cell transplant, this time using my brother, Lee, as the donor.
Wow, that's quite the journey in a little under 2 years.
Yes.
So somewhere in the course of all of that, you stumbled, like most people, you kind of stumbled into the CBD thing. How did CBD go in your health journey?
Well, growing up as a competitive athlete, I was never really into cannabis, smoking cannabis recreationally. Obviously, it was around me. It was at school. I did try it second semester of my senior year of college just to say that I did something crazy in college. But as an athlete, I just never really got into it. And then once my playing career was over and cancer came around, I was, plagued by just all the side effects that happens when you go through cancer. And I was popping a lot of synthetics. Every night it would be Zofran for nausea, Ativan for anxiety, Percocet for pain, Zoloft for mood, Ambien for sleep. And then I'd hop up in the morning and I'd have to pop an Adderall just to get enough energy to go to the doctors. And it just was a cycle that I wasn't comfortable with. And so I started looking to alternative therapies and ways to mitigate the side effects of cancer treatments. And I knew of cannabis, read about it, friends used it all the time. And so I got into it. And it was a scary situation for me because I had to go to the streets of New York City to get a product because the doctors wouldn't prescribe it. So mask, gloves, balled from chemo, meeting up with a drug dealer who's selling everything, not just cannabis. And for me, it just was a really stressful situation on top of an already horrible situation. But it really helped me. I could sleep, I could eat. I was a lot nicer to be around, that's for sure. And, it really opened my eyes to this kind of form of healing. Once I was through the cancer, I kind of got away from it a little bit. And, but that's when, for me, the anxiety kicked in, living a life of anxiety and fear of relapse and uncertainty and invisible scars that need healing was just plagued me. And I just started getting into these really, destructive loops of, obsessive wondering. What I call them the what if scenarios. Like, what if the chemo didn't work? What if the cancer comes back? What if I die? What if I don't get married? What if I don't have kids? Like, all this stuff was just plaguing my mind. And I was just on this constant loop and I just wasn't living. I was just stuck. And that's when someone introduced me to CBD. And I, at first, used regular CBD. Now I'm shifting a little bit to CBDA. I use about 25 to 40 milligrams a day, like a multivitamin. And for me, that just for some reason clicked. Like, it let me take almost like a deep breath. All the clutter in my mind just eased a little bit. So I was able to just focus on other stuff and kind of get past these ruminative thoughts. And it was just really helpful for me.
Well, that's great. Now, as a pharmacist, I have to obsess about how medications get into people. So how are you taking your CBD? A capsule, an oil, a vaporizer? How do you take it?
I consume with a tincture. So it's a liquid form underneath the tongue. It's a rosin pressed CBD. So I was really interested in just getting the purest product possible. So rosin, for those that don't know, it's just basically it's a little bit of heat and a lot of pressure. It's like fresh squeezed CBD, if that's what you want to call it. Like, imagine putting an orange into a press, you squeeze out the juice, same exact with a piece of a hemp flower, partially dried, squeeze it, the juice that drips out, we mix it with fractionated coconut oil, and then that's what I put in my body underneath the tongue.
And it's also interesting, you think you notice more of an effect with the CBDA than you did with the CBD?
Yes, and I'm not a scientist, so you guys can probably dig into that a little bit better than I am. But yeah, these are the CBDA. I just felt I was sleeping, I sleep better, and I do a lot. I still work out a lot. So inflammation reasons and like pain in my joints helped a little bit. If I do get into a situation where I need something a little bit stronger, I'm not adverse to adding THC to this formula. So I would gravitate towards like a 1-to-1 CBD to THC ratio. And if I'm really having a panic attack, I have like a vape right there that's full THC that I'll take. And then I'll do the tincture. So it's almost like stacking it. I'll leave the pain, leave the stress with a hit of THC, and then I'll stack with a CBD under the tongue that will kick in about 20 minutes after that. And it really calms me down. That's
really good. Kirk, because I can't see you, you're in a different house. Did you have any clinical questions for Ethan before we ask him a few others?
Yes. You say your home address is in New York City.
My home address now is in New Hampshire, actually.
Okay, is that because New Hampshire's legalized?
That is because my wife and I just made a choice to kind of get out of the hustle and bustle and synthetic lifestyle of New York City, and we literally moved to the middle of the woods in New Hampshire. We have our own water source. I heat my house with wood. We grow a garden. You can fish. There's wild blueberries all around. And so that was just, after cancer, I just felt I needed to do a little bit more of that in my lifestyle. And New York City, I just wasn't getting the connection to nature and health and that feeling I was looking for.
Well, that goes to your philosophy of live before you die, I guess, eh?
Yes. The New Hampshire state motto is live free or die.
And is New Hampshire a legalized state, medical?
Medically, it's legal. There are very few. I think there's 4 dispensaries in New Hampshire. However, surrounding states like Vermont, Maine, Massachusetts is all adult use recreationally legal. So that's we're surrounded by, good situations.
So when you were going through your cancer treatment, you mentioned that you had to go to the streets to get your cannabis. Were you involving your doctors at that time that you were using cannabis?
Yes, of course. That was a huge. I definitely let them know I was using it. And I was treated at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York City. And at the time, there really was not anyone on staff that was knowledgeable about cannabis and cancer and maybe the interactions, positive, negatives. They definitely didn't push me in that direction. It was 100% my own choice, but I definitely let them know. So if anyone is going through it, do not be afraid to tell your doctor what's really happening. And I would never smoke it just because, that was worrisome of me to put anything into my lungs like that.
Okay, so now you're in New Hampshire. Do you have a medical doctor who's now helping you with your prescription of cannabis?
I do not. I met with a medical cannabis nurse a while back in Massachusetts, and we had a consultation and just went nuts to bolts. Like, I was a little bit new to all of this in terms of the science behind it. So I just really wanted to get an understanding of what it is, how it works, what it will do in my body, dosaging, strains, CBD, CBDA, all that stuff. And so that was important for me to do it properly with the advice of someone who knows what they're talking about.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, one other question here is that you are an international traveler. You travel across borders. How does cannabis play in your travel?
Well, it doesn't really. I'm quite fearful of traveling with it. Sometimes, I will maybe eat an edible before I hop on a plane, like locally, and then I'll just nothing. I usually don't do anything when I'm in another country. However, I haven't really traveled much in that sense. So I think I could probably take CBD with me, and I don't think it would be a problem. However, when I went on to this most recent season of Survivor, season 40, Winners at War, which is currently airing now at 8 p.m. on CBS on Wednesday nights, I asked the doctors if I could take, cannabis or CBD out with me because it's prescribed. It's part of my medicine. Like, if you had other ailments, you could take thyroid medicine, cholesterol medicine. So I asked them, and they ran it up the ladder, which I respect. However, they said no, because it's not legal in Fiji, which is where we are filming.
Right.
So Ethan, just before we run out of time, can you tell us a little bit about Montkush, this CBD company that you're involved with?
Sure. Part of all of this for me was, learning about the plant, and education is one of the most important parts right now. Is there are a lot of new users, and it's a new industry. So for me, a buddy of mine got involved with this farm, Montkush. His name's Anthony Sullivan. You may recognize him from late night infomercials. He's the OxyClean guy. So
okay.
And he had a daughter. He has a daughter with genetic disorders, and so he got her on CBD, and it really transformed their life, her life. And he was like, okay, if I'm going to put something in my daughter's body, I want to know how it's happening. So we bought this farm in Vermont called Montkush, which means happy mountain. And I'm like, all right, well, if you're going to grow that to put in your daughter's body, like, I want in on this because I want to see what that's like if I'm going to put something in my body. So I moved up there this past summer, planted, harvested, processed, watched everything from seed all the way till we pressed it in our giant Sasquatch rosin press, and we put it in the bottle. So felt a lot more comfortable with learning about the process. And it's certified organic, high altitude, hand picked, no solvent free processing. It's just, I think it's a really great product. And we make both CBDA, and then we make a regular traditional CBD product.
Wow, that's you really got involved. And just curious, you could have invested in anything in all over the U.S. and you picked, something that has a growing season closer to Canada. Like, if you're down in California, you'd probably have 2 2 or 3 crops a year.
Correct. Yeah. So this is, I can't say that I've been that involved with like the formation of the farm. It's this guy, Sully and Dave, they did all of it, but I kind of show up, I look pretty and I do some of that stuff and it's fun. But yeah, the growing season's tough. We're about to go into the May 1st. We're planting again, which is exciting. And, one of the big things, I listened to a couple of your podcasts prior to this and you were speaking live with someone, I think it was at Reefer Madness, and she's just talking about kind of struggling with substance issues. And one of the things that I'm most excited about in my journey is that my whole life has evolved around philanthropy. I do a lot of, giving back to the world, and that doesn't stop here in cannabis. So I took everything that I learned from grassroots soccer and our adolescent health and behavior change, and we're going to be applying that to the cannabis industry because I started a new foundation called Safe Roots Foundation. And what we do is we raise money from the cannabis industry, and then we help fund the best evidence-based teenage drug prevention programs around the country. We feel cannabis is good for public health, but we also feel if more kids start misusing cannabis, it's bad for the kids, it's bad for the industry. So I think just there's a role that the cannabis industry has to play in the long-term sustainability of its own, industry, just like tobacco, anti-smoking, iPhone, anti-screen time, alcohol, drunk driving. We feel the same thing is needed. And so that's what we're doing now with a lot of the proceeds that we're going to be raising within the sales of the cannabis.
You are an interesting guy. I think we've got about 5 minutes left. So I'll see if Kirk has anything else. Then we'll see if you've got any sort of last minute things you want our listeners to hear. So Kirk, anything else?
You're a high profile person who has come out and said that you're using cannabis. You used it during cancer treatment. You're now using it for anxiety and everyday to-day life. Has anybody entered you into a cannabis study? Do you know any studies? Anything like that happening?
No, I would love to be involved in any studies anyone's running. But no, that's a wonderful question. And I, invite anyone, that listening to reach out. If you're looking for people to put into a study, I'm happy to do that, especially the connection between cancer and cannabis and CBD. Obviously you guys know there's so much we don't know. And anyway, I can help that would be a blessing. I'm a firm believer in nature. Nature is the world's pharmacy. One of my drugs, vincristine, was derived from a rare African flower called the rosy periwinkle. So it's crazy what can be found in nature and how it's helping people now. So I think I'm down for that. All the research is something I believe in.
And your farm, are you growing sativa cannabis, sativa marijuana plants, or are you growing hemp?
We're only growing hemp, high CBD content hemp, which we're finding now as a result. We didn't realize how high CBDA was in it until we started pressing and testing it. And that's when we decided to kind of go the route of creating a full CBDA product, because it's a lesser known, attribute to the plant that most people aren't into right now. So we're finding some good results with that.
Wonderful.
So Ethan, we're getting ready to wrap up. Anything else you think our listeners need to know about cannabis, CBD, Survivor? My colleague said, ask him who wins. I don't imagine he'll tell us that, but anything else you can do for tell our listeners to wrap it up? Well,
no, I just feel that, it's a really interesting time in the world right now. And I, suggest everyone, takes time to accept the situation we're in, and then take time to map out how they're going to, live the next, 6-8 months of our life, and be careful on how you use substances in these times of crisis. And just, low and slow is the dose. That's what you want to do. And anyone who's listening, if you want any products on Montkush, there's this code that I am allowed to give out. Survivor 50, you get 50% off anything on the site. We encourage you to check it out, and love to hear your thoughts on the product and how it makes you feel.
Kirk, we've said it at the beginning, we'll say it again. I love this. Now, I checked because, we did our little bit of backgrounder on him. He's only a year younger than me. And I was telling some of my workmates that, I think he's aged better than him. And then I had a second thought. No, back in 2001, he looked better than me then too. So, maybe nothing much has changed.
This is a phenomenal man. I admire him. He was gracious to us. I've done my research on him. Anybody who's going to hear this story, really go into the internet, study this fella. You have to live your life before you die. And this is a man that's living his life. I found it interesting. We talked about CBDA. Now, let's talk about CBDA.
Right. So I like that part too. So if you remember, and I think we first sort of stumbled across this way back when we were talking to Emily Kirkham, the chemist, and when we were trying to do some cooking on our own. Everything that comes out of the plant, all the cannabinoids that come out of the plant are the acid forms. So THCA, CBDA. So that's, you go chew on a cannabis leaf, that's what you're going to get. So that's why when you're trying to get, we'll call it the psychoactive effects, or you're trying to get high, you want to heat it, to decarboxylate it, to change it from the acid to the non-acid form, so you're taking off a carboxyl group. So, but he's finding the CBDA, still the acid form, the I didn't heat up my CBD form, that is what he thinks is helping him at least as much as the CBD.
Well, this is interesting because I've seen he uses his cannabis by pressing it. He talked about pressing it. In our episode with the homegrown episode, when I was in the basement of the craft grower, he showed me how those presses work. Those presses work by literally squeezing like orange juice, but there's heat involved. So my question is the acid not being converted to CBD during the pressing, during the heating process?
Well, I think one of our next episodes needs to be someone to explain the whole rosin making thing. Because it's funny, I was actually talking with a coworker about a friend of a friend who is making rosins, and I went back to the Green Beaver episode too. But my rudimentary understanding of the rosin presses is you have control over how much heat and how much pressure. So my pharmacist brain says if you squished it and didn't heat it, you could get CBDA out of it. But I don't know that for sure, and I think we need to learn from someone who knows more.
Well, and my mechanical brain is telling me that as you press and compress, heat is generated.
True, but you're not going to get, a ton of heat out of just the pressing, where, again, someone will tell me that I'm wrong, but my understanding is the rosin presses, you can actually make the plates hot while you're squishing. So you could squish and heat. But again, I'm sure someone will tell me I'm an idiot. So that's okay. We want to be told we're idiots when we are. So we're going to have to interview someone who knows a whole lot about rosin presses.
Yeah, exactly. It's fascinating to me. The other thing that I found interesting is that CBDA is essentially the raw cannabis, right?
Yeah.
So when we look at the Manitoba law, now we're in Manitoba, Canada, and in Manitoba, our knowledgeable government has said we can't grow in Canada, in Manitoba, because they're afraid of the children getting access to marijuana plants.
That has come up, yes.
Whereas more than likely, there's more danger in the liquor cabinet than a raw marijuana plant that has CBDA and THCA in it. Because THCA is not intoxicating either.
No, not psychoactive as far as we know, or at least not nearly as intoxicating or psychoactive as THC after you've heated it.
Exactly. The other thing I liked about talking to Ethan was that he's now a hemp farmer. And at the end of the interview, and I'm hoping we keep that part in, where he's actually listened to our episodes, man. So it was interesting that he actually took notes that we're going to teach him about hemp farming through our podcast.
And sorry, Ethan, we did get on a bit of tangent, but we really, really enjoyed that episode and everything that you're doing from the Grassroots Soccer Association, looking at just adolescent health in general and AIDS in particular. To all your other philanthropic work, to Montkush. I think we're going to have look a little bit more into what they're doing at Montkush, because it sounds like an interesting operation.
It really does. I think I'm gonna spend some time with Ethan.
I was trying to tell someone at lunch hour that, but I don't watch any reality TV. And then I spent 15 minutes discussing with them different episodes. So maybe I watch more than I let on. So it's good. So how are we going to wrap this one up? Do you have any music picked out for us this time?
Let's leave this one to Renee.
So Renee, pick us something good. Kirk, Be safe up north, and everybody else, remember to come back to Reefer Madness, the podcast.
Cheers, mate.
All right, thanks, guys, and thanks, Ethan. I'm back here at the studio, and I've decided to play something from Zimbabwe, because that's where Ethan played some soccer. There was a really great musician called Oliver Mutukudzi, also called Tuku, and I figured we should play something from him, because as much as it's not localized to Dauphin, some of his band members were from Canada, so that's localizing it somewhat. Anyway, here's Zaweri, Oliver Mutukudzi, Tuku, on Reefer Madness, the podcast.
Like the show? Let us know. We're Reefer Madness on Instagram and Facebook, at Reefer Madness on Twitter, or head over to the website at reefermed.ca to find out what we're all about and what's coming up next. Talk to you later.
You're using my bandwidth. Will you please pause the
We are
pause,
watching
pause
Trevor
the game.
parent his son.
And we're recording this conversation. Trevor's parenting badly. Eric, can you please pause whoever you're shooting?
No.
Come on.
What? No, this isn't even connected to yours.
Anyway, I'm not winning that one.